In this episode, Alvaro shares his experience from Strategy Sprint, the one-week virtual consulting project. You'll get to hear an overview of the project, the skills he gained, the problem his team was asked to solve, and his biggest takeaways. After chatting with Alvaro, we bring you another session of After Office Hours, where we answer a listener question about consulting case practice. Don't forget to send in your questions about consulting to podcast@managementconsulted.com. Let's get started. Here's our conversation with Alvaro. Alvaro, I'm excited to welcome you to Strategy Simplified. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, first, can you kick us off with an overview of your background, just kind of the stops that have, along your journey that have led you to being where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a continuous improvement manager. I'm based in Calgary, Canada. And for the past 4 years, I've been leading implementation projects in the areas of operational excellence and some strategic initiatives with C-suite visibility. And the areas where I've been working on, or sort of the industry, it's the fertilizer industry, and there's also some chemical industries associated to that as well. I'm originally from Peru. First half of my career, I spent it in Lima, and I worked for 500 Fortune companies such as Procter & Gamble and Microsoft before immigrating to Canada. And while I was here, I went to Queen's University in Ontario to pursue my MBA. And I then decided to get certified as Lean Six Sigma practitioner and got my black belt certification, which is really all in all, it's the toolbox that I have for what I do today.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you've got a lot going on, and you've done a lot in your career. That's awesome. And so you were a consultant in Management Consultant's Strategy Sprint in May 2021. And so that's a one-week consulting project. You're put on a team to solve a real world problem for a real client. So curious, what is the problem that your team was tasked to solve?
So basically, this was in the tourist space or tourism space. A destination management company, or DMC, based in Japan, was looking to expand their existing operations in the US. They wanted to double their revenue in the next 12 months. Okay. And so, yeah, that was sort of the prompt for our case.
Okay, well, simple enough. Double revenue in 1 year. Great. Okay, and before I get to the actual work you did for the client in the project week, before that you received some skills training, and you got to apply that in a case competition with your team and your project leader. So curious how the training and the case competition helped you during the project week.
Well, I have to be very transparent. Our team won that competition. So it was really exciting to right off the bat, we were already winners.
Oh, I bet.
So it was really exciting to sort of put in practice, because what the first sort of round of competition does is it's a quick way to implement a lot of the learnings that you have gone through in such a short period of time and put it in context in let's say in a smaller scope kind of thing. And so I think, the structure approach to be able to clarify the scope of the work, start with that hypothesis up front, instead of trying to boil the ocean with all the many aspects of the problem, and then being able to break the problem into pieces that then became work streams was really, really helpful, along with the whole pyramid structure approach to how you actually package and present the end result. Having that in mind was really helpful, not just for the competition itself, but for the full week that we had following up.
Okay. And that's a lot of the feedback that we hear as well. The kind of the pyramid principle way of communicating and structuring is often kind of the most helpful things that people get out of the training. And so I'm glad to hear that helped you. And I'm sure it's serving you well beyond just the 1 week experience as well. So, all right, let's get to the project week. Can you walk us through that? What did you do exactly?
Yeah, so we had a very first meeting with the client. So we had an opportunity to prepare some questions with the prompt in mind. And then the week went so fast, but basically we had the opportunity to understand the problem after the client meeting, build that hypothesis and break the problem into work streams. So basically, how are we going to, bring the revenue levels? How are we going to double them in 12 months? What are the issues or opportunities that we can leverage? So there was a lot of research work throughout the week. And then we split that work into work streams. So personally, I was in charge of the capabilities section in terms of how are we going to make sure that we have the right boots on the ground to support that growth, and where in the US would make sense to expand to so that we can support that growth. The other two extremes were related to understanding the market dynamics, mainly looking at what are the product differentiation. Are we at par or subpar when it came to our product offering, and then some of the partnerships within that space that were required for that growth. What was really important throughout that period is those touch points. So we had, obviously, the team would work and meet basically every other day, if not every day throughout the week. But then we also had one-on-ones with, in our case, was a former BCG consultant who was the team lead. And then closer to, let's say, day 4, between 3 or 4, I can't remember, we had sort of a check-in with what would be the partner role in that project, where we had already fleshed out the hypotheses and understood where were the levers for this growth. And we had an opportunity to be challenged about our assumptions, whether we had the right data supporting some of these recommendations. And then thankfully, we didn't have to change that much. I want to say probably we needed to add 30% of the work on top of what we had already done to get it to the finish line.
Okay, sounds like your team was very busy that week, and there's a lot to unpack here. But you mentioned your meetings with the team. What was it like to interact with your team specifically, and how many people were on your team?
Yeah, we were, I believe, 7 people, and we had an opportunity to work either in pairs or as an individual. We have 4 different work streams. So typically, I believe some teams would be not necessarily 7, but 5 or 6. So we were sort of the anomaly in that regard. Some other teams had 5 or 6 team members. In our case, it helped with the workload. And it was really interesting. We had people, experienced professionals like myself, and there was another fellow in the US. Most of the team members were out of the US. And then we have also some PhD students, some recent MBA grads or current MBA grads. And we all had to learn from each other, right? So different work styles, different time zones. It was really interesting to quickly understand, okay, what are the tools that we need to use to effectively collaborate? And then what are also the ways that we can, share our insights without having to wait for the next scheduled meeting? And so we were very nimble in that way. We were really results oriented from that perspective. And I think everybody realized that the week was going by so fast. And we could see live the progress on the deck because we use Google Docs for that. And we could see progress, and we could see, oh, you're going in this direction. This is how my work can support that opinion, and we would connect in between meetings.
That's awesome. And earlier you mentioned the kind of daily check-ins with an MVP consultant. In your case, a former BCG consultant. But how impactful were those meetings and your just interactions with that former consultant?
Yeah, on a personal level, I want to say one of the reasons I wanted to do this is to test my skill set in a different environment outside of the bubble of your work, your industry, and your team. And that was really important to have those one-on-ones so that I could test whether the way I was thinking about solving the problem was the right one. Mm-hmm. How we could really leverage each other's work, and then also our team lead would provide us with some guidance in terms of feedback on the spot in terms of, yeah, this is great, keep doing that, don't waste your time over here, be more diligent about this, more purposeful about these other pieces that will yield a better result for what we're trying to achieve. So I think that was it really brought it home, that feeling that, okay, you're actually working for a client in an MBB sort of environment, and you're living it. You're living it the closest because these guys have been there, done that, and they're leading us through that same schedule and process and speed of things.
Absolutely. So you kind of got to experience what it would be like to work on an actual consulting engagement. Yeah, that's awesome. We'll be right back after this quick message. Join the next strategy sprint to build consulting skills, add killer experience to your resume, and prepare for life on the job. In Strategy Sprint, you, in a team of 6 led by an MBB consultant, solve a strategic problem for a real-world business. By the end of the project week, you'll have experienced a taste of what it's like to work in consulting at McKinsey, Bain, or BCG. Oh, and by the way, it looks great on a resume. Our team will even help you add the experience to your CV. Plus, you'll be issued a certificate of completion at the end of the program. So, apply today. Click the link in this episode's show notes to fill out the 2-minute application. There are limited spots remaining, so don't miss out. So at the end of the project, your team got to present its findings and recommendations from the week to your client. So can you share the recommendations that you made and the projected impact for the client?
Yeah, so at the end of the week, basically at the end of day 5, we were able to come up with a sound recommendation that would allow our client to reach $6 million in revenue, which would mean doubling their revenue in the span of 12 months. We thought through that in a way that, again, using the pyramid principle from 3 main angles. So number 1, product differentiation. Number 2, partnerships. Number 3, internal capabilities. And with each of them, we've had sort of what is the intervention that needed to happen and why we thought that was the right approach, backed up by our research and data analysis. And so from a product differentiation standpoint, one of the interesting things we found was that they were trying to be positioned as a luxury product, yet they're offering either either in terms of the makeup of it, how it was being packaged, as well as the pricing was subpar. So we obviously wanted to make sure that they brought along a different set of offerings that was more in line with the US market expectations. And then to achieve that, we wanted them to establish some key partnerships in some of the other areas. So they had a small office in New York. We suggested that they open new operations on the West Coast, and that they hire a team of with some initial team on the West Coast, not just out of New York. And then the last but not least, in terms of internal capabilities point, had to do with their online presence. It was to us, we're leaving this in and out from a branding, as search engine optimization standpoint, website positioning, etc. There was a lot to be done on that front, and it looked like they were still relying on some of the materials coming out of Japan, and they needed to be sort of customized for the US market. Something that other Japanese competitors in the US had already done. So we had examples to show, guys, there's a gap here that we need to improve and implement.
Absolutely. So did you get to present as well in that final presentation?
Yeah, I had an opportunity to quickly present. We divided the presentation, and we all sort of presented our own work streams. So that was sort of neat from that standpoint, just the way we split the work. We owned the work stream, we owned a piece of the recommendation, and we owned the data behind it. So it was really easy for us to just jump into that piece of the presentation in case any questions would come up, or, from the client in this case we were ready and prepared to respond to those, just because we became subject matter experts on that piece.
Absolutely. So you got some experience in slide building and presenting to C-suite. So that's awesome. What was your biggest takeaway from the whole experience?
So I've had an opportunity to reflect on that a few months ago, and today I work on the same nature of projects, presenting in front of the CEO or one of his presidents or VPs, direct reports. And it has helped me bridge the gap between what I'm able to achieve in-house without bringing in external consultants. So the point being here is, we typically had relied a lot internally as an organization on bringing in external consultants, because they had the know-how and the ability to come in very quickly, break the problem, solve it, package it in the way that, the C-suite would understand it and accept it and go ahead with the recommendation. So if you haven't gone through this type of training in terms of how to do the same for your own projects, you're always going to fall short in terms of how you communicate it and how you present, from the hypothesis. Every slide is an action-oriented slide, and you have a key recommendation, and you have 3 pillars for your main recommendation, and there's data, that backs it up, and that makes it all sound, and, it's easier to tell the story about what you're trying to present and influence. That is something that, at a very early in your career, allows you to have access and have the ability to lead these type of strategic projects and that have, high impact, high visibility within the organization.
Right. So through this, you really added a lot of value to the organization in just you learning how to think and structure work, like a consultant. So they don't have to hire externally as much, which is really huge.
That's right. That's right. There are things that you could still think you need some external expertise, but for what we are capable of and we can run internally, we are better at presenting it in a way that gets buy-in very quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so continuing on this same thread, but coming at it from kind of a skills perspective, can you just kind of name one soft skill and maybe one hard skill that you kind of gained to add to your toolkit from Strategy Sprint?
Yeah, for me, was the ability to bring in a team that did not work together before, but had the ability to think in the same way through that structure way of approaching a problem, and into an industry that none of us really were very well versed, to quickly come out with a recommendation. I think that from a soft skill is just that ability to work as a team, number one, and from the technical and more like the toolbox kind of thing, it's that structure approach.
So if you were talking to somebody who's kind of thinking about Strategy Sprint, on the fence about it, what would you tell them about applying?
Yeah, so for me, the two things that drove me to being part of this in the first place, and that at the end I actually ended up getting, was number one, the ability to experience the closest to being an MBB consultant. And I've been in, we've engaged in my organization many MBB firms to work in projects. So I got to be on the other side, and I got to, and I can definitely tell you that's exactly sort of how I was looking at things from the outside, now being on the inside, sort of the speed of things, the cadence, the way work was split, and how you needed to defend your research and your work stream was really, really reflective of what it is in reality. Number two, I think, just want to go back to that ability to take a problem, break it down, solve it, and package in a way that you can make a sound recommendation that has a higher likelihood to get buy-in across the board, especially as you're progressing in your career. That becomes something paramount and important for career progress. And so regardless of whether you are thinking of going into an MBB firm, or whether consulting is what your next career goal that you're trying to achieve, this skill set, you can take it into any industry, into any type of role.
Okay, so what you're saying, or it sounds like what you're saying is, it was like you're glad that you did it. So
yeah, no, if you want a tagline there, yeah, it's go for it. There's no regrets. Either way, it's a win. Just make sure that you allocate the time, because that can be challenging as well. And we're not asking too much necessarily, but it's just a matter of being committed to attend the trainings, to ask the question, to participate, and to get that learning and put it in practice as part of your engagement throughout the week.
Absolutely. And we'll include the link to apply in the show notes of this podcast. So Alvaro, thanks for sharing about Strategy Sprint. I've got a few more questions here for you as we wrap this up. But just to get to know you personally, but we'd love to hear just one item from your bucket list.
Go on those, what did they call those hot air balloons in Cappadocia in Turkey? That's in the bucket list. Hopefully I'll get to do that.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Let me know when you go.
I'll send pictures.
Oh, I love that. Sounds beautiful. All right, and last thing, just one kind of read, listen, or watch recommendation. Something you're enjoying right now that you think somebody else might be able to enjoy as well.
Um, hmm. So I'm into podcasts these days, and being in the operations and partially on the strategy side of things, I find Inside the Strategy Room podcast by McKinsey. It's something that I find, it makes me think big picture, despite, the details and the tactical aspects of my role. And they talk about different aspects and different trends around the world. It keeps it very specific and relevant to what's going on in the world today.
Okay, great. Well, we'll link that in the show notes so people can check it out. Awesome. Well, Alvaro, thank you so much for sharing your experience with Strategy Sprint, sharing a little bit about you. I really enjoyed it, and I know our listeners will as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And have a great day. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm glad I was able to share with you guys my experience, and hopefully more people will go through that as well.
Welcome to another segment of After Office Hours. We're excited to bring you this question. Today, we've got an anonymous question from LinkedIn. By the way, go ahead and give us a follow on LinkedIn. We share every day just updates on consulting, on the industry, case interview best practices, breaking news, and much more. So go ahead, give us a follow over on LinkedIn. And here today, we have Stephanie to answer this question. Stephanie, how are you doing?
Great, Japheth. How are you today?
I am very well. Thank you very much. So let's get right to it. The question from Mr. Anonymous from LinkedIn is, do you provide consulting case practice for AlixPartners? Stephanie, what do you have to say?
Mr. Anonymous, Ms. Anonymous, the short answer is yes, right? We provide case interview practice for any firm that you would be preparing for. And even more broadly speaking, we're seeing the case interview increase in prevalence outside of consulting as well. So building this muscle in terms of case interview practice, thinking and talking and writing at the same time, solving complex, ambiguous business problems on the fly in discussion and engagement with your interviewer live. It's a muscle that you have to build. Now, yes, the exact firm that you are targeting and that you're recruiting into, that may give you a little bit more direction in terms of the topics and content of what you're likely to come across in that type of firm case interview. So AlixPartners does quite a bit of turnaround work. You could see some good opportunity for some M&A, recovery, transformation type content in the case interview. And there's a number of different kind of, types of case interview conversations that you could have. But what's going to make you most prepared for an AlixPartners interview is well-rounded case interview practice. And that's what we will help give you here. So, in our case library, you would be able to go through and you would be able to sort and filter and see which of the cases from our 550 in the case library originally came from an AlixPartners case. But we wouldn't want you to stop your practice there. You should get a broad diversity of practice across problem types, industry, and functional areas so that you have built this case interview muscle in a well-rounded way. Also hope that you really look at our coaching services. We have a set of ex-McKinsey, Bain, and BCG coaches on staff who have years of experience and really lean into this process to help you create well-rounded candidates ready to interview, ready for that game day spot, be on the hot seat. And they can help coach you specifically towards AlixPartners' likely content and the approach of that style of interview. But your preparation should hopefully not only prepare you for an AlixPartners interview, but any other case interview that you would come up against. So really wish you the best in this process and that hope that you would choose to work with us as you continue to prepare.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie, again for in-depth answers there. Anonymous, we hope that satisfies your question, and we hope you do choose to work with us. We'll link in the show notes to our kind of team of MBB coaches and the resources there so you can get started today to work with with our team to get ready for the interviews and to ace it. Folks, if you have any other questions related to consulting, breaking into the industry, whatever you got, we're happy to answer them. So go ahead and send that in to podcast@managementconsultant.com. We'd even love to hear your voice. So to record a quick voice recording on your phone and send that in. And we're excited to get more questions and continue to help folks out on their journey into consulting and beyond. So Stephanie, thanks again. And folks, we'll catch you again next week. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions about Strategy Sprint, schedule time with a member of our team today. The link is in the show notes. In addition, apply to the next Strategy Sprint project today before we sell out. All links mentioned are in the show notes. We'll catch you again next time for more great content.